Hello wrestling fans, the Wrestling Wizard here and welcome to another video. Now this is just my personal opinion, but I feel as of late that WWE are overexposing factions, and that's not a knock on factions. I've always been a fan of factions, but I feel at the moment if you're a general WWE fan and you're not a fan of the Bloodline and you're not a fan of Judgment Day, you're pretty doomed when it comes to watching WWE, because these acts are literally getting forced down our throats. Factions in general are taking over, and that is not at all a knock on the WWE product. Overall, Triple H has done a really good job. We're getting logical storylines, long-term storytelling. We're not getting absolute madness storylines like and I chuckle because I think back to the Lana Bobby Lashley affair, involving, of course, Rusev and Liv Morgan. We don't get storylines that literally feel like they've been drawn out of a hat at random a minute before the shows are about to air. So we can't really complain on that front, but I feel like we're not getting that many compelling one-to-one feuds without factions getting involved. Every single time you get a feud, you know that a faction's going to come out and get involved. The only individual feud I can think of at the moment that's genuinely really compelling is the Seth freaking Rollins Shinsuke Nakamura feud. It's fire, and it's because there is no faction involvement. You're just letting a really, really intriguing feud play out and letting the storytelling do the work. At the moment, it feels like certain superstars, even within factions, aren't getting used to their full potential because they're almost serving this double duty. And what I mean by that, I'll give an example. Someone like Rhea Ripley. She is the top women's champion on the Raw side of things. The women's world champion. And her reign, not taking anything away from Rhea as a performer, I think she's fantastic, it's been pretty lackluster. And it's because she's doing double duty. She's trying to serve alongside Judgment Day, acting almost like the peacemaker within the faction, coming out and attacking every man and his dog, literally. And it feels like that's taking away from her run as world champion in the women's division. Also, if we look over on the SmackDown side, is Bobby Lashley even a wrestler these days? He literally comes out and, manages the Street Profits? And again, working towards another faction angle. And it takes away the focus of a superstar that is literally up there on par with taking on Roman Reigns. When you think of Bobby Lashley, you think of an opponent for Roman Reigns. They're not heating him up. They're not heating any superstars up to take on the top champs in WWE because they seem to be obsessed with faction angles. When you've got a decent storyline arc, like I'm thinking Gunther versus Chad Gable, that was awesome. The powerful, dominant Gunther, IC champion, historic reign. And then you've got this underdog in Chad Gable, massively over babyface. That should all be about Chad Gable taking on Gunther one-to-one. We don't need Imperium. We don't need the Alpha Academy. And yes, I do love the Alpha Academy. A guilty pleasure of mine, that's for sure. But just have those two go at it on a PLE for the IC title. You don't need to involve factions at every single turn. I just feel that they're just overexposing for the ratings. They know that Judgment Day are massively over, so they're pushing them to the moon. And they know for 100% certainty that people will tune in for the Bloodline storyline arc, even if it feels like it's treading water, and it feels very much with the Bloodline storyline at the moment. We're just waiting for Roman Reigns to come back. The Bloodline storyline at the moment, I would sum up as the start of a new series in a TV show you've been watching, but you've got to wait until the end of season finale, and that's where Roman Reigns shows up, and then you get more momentum with that storyline moving forward. It just seems like every angle we get, most main events, it's factions. Judgment Day coming out and going after Cody Rhodes this week on Raw for Jey Uso randomly to save him. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn taking on Judgment Day. The Bloodline beating down people on SmackDown, and then people come back and get their revenge. AJ Styles gets beaten up and then takes on Roman Reigns. And guess what? The Bloodline will probably save Roman Reigns in that matchup that's going to be inevitable between the phenomenal AJ Styles and Roman Reigns. You know it's going to come. It feels like WWE aren't building up acts to be credible opponents for champions within WWE, because all we hear is factions. And yes, I've got no problem with WWE involving factions and heating up faction angles leading into, say, Survivor Series War Games. Faction wars are great when they're done really, really well. It just feels like at the moment it's a full calendar year of faction storylines. When you do have compelling matches, and I'm thinking back to Seth Rollins versus Finn Balor when they had their match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Of course, they've had multiple matches. You weren't thinking about the match. You were thinking about the involvement of Judgment Day, the involvement of Damian Priest and that Money in the Bank briefcase. You're kind of forgetting about the superstars individually and what they can bring to the table because you're just looking at the WWE Universe from a faction angle perspective. And if you take a look at Damage Control, for instance, has Damage Control benefited a character like Bayley, the leader of Damage Control? No, she just feels like an afterthought. And Bayley, once upon a time, was a dominant champion within the women's division, and now she's just an afterthought to her fellow Damage Control member Io Sky. I just feel at the moment that WWE is really missing those individual standout stars when it comes to the product. WWE really is missing the likes of Randy Orton, and I think Randy Orton would massively help the Cody Rhodes character. I think a heel Orton versus a babyface Cody Rhodes would be a really compelling storyline, and that stops Cody Rhodes just randomly making these completely out of nowhere speeches and then getting attacked by faction members. And I think that would be a really, really meaty feud between the two of them and really compelling. But at the moment, there's not really much for us to sink our teeth into if it's not the Bloodline or it's not Judgment Day. And yes, I like the fact they split up Jimmy and Jay. I think that's a real positive from WWE at the moment. They're really getting their individual feel, their individual build, which I'm liking and I'm optimistic for the future. But why has Jimmy gone back to the Bloodline? Like, Roman Reigns has decimated you, hospitalised you. You attacked your brother Jay because you were doing it for him. Now you've gone back with your tail between your legs and rejoined the Bloodline. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense, unless of course Jimmy is playing Roman Reigns all along, which I hope he is, which actually makes sense from a storyline perspective, because why would Jimmy just rejoin Roman with no problem? Why would Roman accept that also as well when he didn't want Jimmy back in the first place? Now I'm probably just sounding Nigel negative, but what do you think? Get down in the comment section, share your thoughts and opinions. I don't want to keep turning on Raw and going, it's just going to be Judgment Day in pretty much every segment. I don't want to turn on SmackDown and go, oh, it's just the Bloodline again. Now, yes, they can make these make sense long term in terms of individual superstars moving forward, like a Solo Sikoa. He's obviously going to break out of the Bloodline at some point and become a megastar on his own. Same with Jimmy and already Jay at this point. You know, he's making a name for himself, but again involved alongside a storyline arc with Judgment Day. Again, a faction, and if Jay's not got somebody by his side, he's going to be doomed, isn't he? So he's going to call on Cody and Kevin and Sammy. It's all just a little bit predictable at the moment, but that's just my 2 cents. What do you think? As always, thank you so much for watching the video. It'd be very much appreciated if you could like the video, share the video, and even better, subscribe if you're new. We'll catch you in the next one.